Good morning, y'all. Hi, Brian. It's windy out, but I'm gonna be brave to keep the sunshine on. And there is Eddy. Eddy, I'm gonna bring you on right at 10 o'clock so people don't feel like they missed out if they tune in right at 10. But before that, I'm just gonna tell you this week, tomorrow I have Fred Leumer in Austria, and then Mimi Castile in the afternoon. She's really big on biodiversity and fascinating. And then Carol Feely on Thursday, we're going to talk about zagging in the new economy. She started a winery in Bergerac, and she's really creative about doing what you have to get by. And I think she's inspiring for a time like this. And then on Friday with John Bojanowski of Languedoc Outsiders at 10 a.m. So let's get Eddy on here. Hi, Vineyard Brands. Thanks for helping me set this up, Allie. All right.
Hello, hi, Jeff.
You have wind.
Yeah, it's I'm gonna go to a quiet place.
That's much. Thank you. Awesome. How are you? We've not met, so I'm excited to chat with you and learn more about your domain. You start by
Yes,
introduce yourself and tell us where you are.
yeah. So let me first maybe get a little view of the area.
Man,
So that's a good start, I think.
gorgeous. Wow. Wow.
So I'm right in the middle of the Grand Cru Schlossberg here, which was the first Grand Cru to be classified in Alsace in 1975. This is granite soil. We're in the valley of Kaisersberg here. And that's one of our flagship wines at Domaine Weinbach. We own about 12 hectares of Grand Cru Schlossberg, so we are by far the largest owner of Grand Cru Schlossberg. And I'm just between some of our plots here. We can maybe show them later. So that's the valley of Kaisersberg, right here, the town. And over there, you see the winery is just over there.
And what's the name of the town you're right above?
Kaisersberg.
Eichersberg. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, the views over there are just unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's pretty quiet. We've been out of lockdown for 10 days now, but in the middle of the vineyard, it's still pretty quiet. So.
Yeah. Wow. 10 days. I thought it was Monday.
It was last Monday. Yeah,
God, time is very, very flexible these days, or very stretchable.
So let me go back to a sheltered place where it's a bit less windy,
Perfect. Okay.
and I can tell you a bit about myself and the winery. Is it okay here?
Perfect.
Should be a bit more sheltered.
Nice.
Yes. So hi everybody. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Jeff, for hosting this. I'm Eddy Fowler from Domaine Weinbach. I work now at the Domaine with my mother, Katrine. Maybe you've met her, and my brother Theo, who's in charge of the vineyards, of the farming. I personally joined the family business 3 years ago. I was a banker in Brazil in another life, and joined in 2017. Took some enology classes when I came back to get a bit upgraded on the technical side. And I'm now overseeing the winemaking together with my mother and our cellar master, and all the commercial export part of the business with my mother as well.
Wow. I have to ask how you got to Brazil? Banking, makes sense. You chose it, but how did you get to Brazil?
It was by chance. I was an intern in Paris, and the guy who had hired me was promoted over there to be the head of the team down in Brazil. And after a few months, he called me. I was still an intern in Paris, and he needed an extra pair of hands. He asked me if I wanted to join. I was 24. I was like, yeah, sure, Brazil.
Wow. I want to start by asking just general Alsace, but while I let you think about your answer, I want to just mention my friend Anna Cabrales is on here. She's doing a new project called Summation, where every day she's chatting with some sommeliers about health and lifestyle and things to do during the quarantine and how to survive. And I will tag her later and follow her in my story. But She's been instrumental in getting me up on here and inspirational too. Okay, so tell us what is Alsace?
I think the few main facts about Alsace, very historical wine region. We've been having vineyards here since the Romans, so for about 2,000 years. Very particular climate situation due to the Vosges Mountains. Actually, the Vosges Mountains here, it's about 1,200, 400 meters elevation. Mountain chain that basically acts as a shelter. As in France, most of the rains, the precipitation comes from the west, from the Atlantic Ocean, and this mountain range shelters Alsace and makes it one of the driest regions in France. So very very interesting region to grow wine, to grow vines, and to ripen them properly, unlike other region. You go a few miles on the other side of the hills. They have about 3 to 4 times the amount of rainfall that we have on our side here. So yeah, it's a lot of sunshine, a bit of rain in the winter, a bit of rain, some storms in the summer, but in general about 400 to 500 millimeters of rain. So pretty dry region, with an interesting factor, which is also thanks to the Vosges Mountain, a pretty good temperature gap between night and day. So even during the summer, it can get to 38, 40 during the day, but it will usually go down to 12, 15 at night. You definitely need a jacket at night, especially in the vineyards. You get a cool breeze coming down from the mountain, and that's what helps us maintain some of the acidity levels in Alsace.
Wow, it's so fun. I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that, because when we think of terroir, you think it translates to earth, but it's really not just the actual soil; it's the mountains and the climate. How much
Exactly,
sun,
yeah.
Really special. So sorry to interrupt.
Yes, thanks. So that's the climate part, and then of course the geology in Alsace is probably one of the most diverse in the world. I don't know of any wine region in the world that has such a diverse geology as in Alsace. We have about 15 families of soils of terroir, ranging from volcanic to marl, limestone, clay, granites, like here on the Schlossberg, slate. So also obviously with some sandy steel soils on the flatland down in the valleys. So a lot of different soil types.
You said families of soil. I have not heard that expression before. Can you explain that a little bit?
It's just basically the type of soil, the type of soil that's of mother rock, if you want, that's beneath the topsoil. Most of the region don't speak about soil family because it's just one family. You go to Champagne, it's limestone family with some variations, but it's all limestone family. You go to Burgundy, it's some limestone family, also with some variations, but Beaujolais is mostly granite. So most of the wine region in the world is just one family of soil. It's just limestone or granite or slate. Or Alsace is, it's 15 different families, and within that families a lot of different variations as well. So none of out of the 51 Grand Crus in Alsace, none of them is the same. Although there might be there are 4 or 5 granite Grand Crus, there are a few limestones Grand Crus, a couple of volcanic ones, but all of them, because of the different elevation, have been eroded over millions of years in a different way, and so the different layers are exposed. Different layers of the soils are exposed in different places. So that makes Alsace very unique, very complex, and obviously the other side of that is that it sometimes might be a little bit too complex for some of the consumers, especially if you add on it's basically a 3D matrix, right? You have the type of soils, so a lot of different soil types, 7 different grape varieties, and you have the time axis as well, because you have the late harvest and the noble rot wine. So it's a pretty complex 3-dimensional matrix, which makes them very exciting in terms of food pairing. I mean, you can basically pair any food in the world, any type of dish, with some kind of Alsace wine, but it sometimes makes it a bit complex for the consumers, and that's why thankfully we have you guys, we have the sommeliers to bridge the gap between us and the consumers.
Yeah, it's also often you hear people say, "Oh, I don't like that," and it's like, "That's a bad one then," because there's so much diversity with us, or people think it's all sweet or it's all Gewürztraminer or something, but it's incredibly diverse. How does the different soil types affect the taste and the diversity? in a little more detail, besides just deciding which grape will grow on that particular soil?
I think the mouthfeel, I mean, if you start with the more maybe technical facts, typically you have a bit more water retention on limestone soil or marl, limestone, or the sedimentary type of soil. Higher, so that means higher yields and usually higher acidity.
Okay.
In terms of mouthfeel, so that's a bit more not esoteric because it's varies from one person to the other, but you can find, I think, some common grounds. In terms of mouthfeel, you get much bigger, sort of wider horizontal wines on the sedimentary soil like limestone, clay, marl. And then you have what I call the more vertical, cold, crystalline soils like volcanic granites, which drain a lot of water. So it's a lot more demanding in terms of work. You have to keep them very clean, especially in organic biodynamic farming. It takes a lot more work to keep them clean because you cannot afford too much competition for water. They're very dry soils, typically lower yields, slightly lower acidity, but much more elegant. Between sedimentary soils and crystalline soils is sedimentary soils make more horizontal, plumpier, larger wines, and crystalline soils like granite or volcanic or slate make more vertical wines in terms of mouthfeel.
Wow, that's fascinating. That little nugget. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that again afterwards and pay. I'm trying to follow many things, so sometimes I can't pay as much as I want to every single thing, but I want to go back and take notes. That's fascinating. So
Some of my colleagues use, instead of using horizontal and vertical, they use also the temperature. So they say that limestone sedimentary soil wines are a bit hotter, warmer, and volcanic granite wines are cooler. That's another way to put it.
I like the linear thing. So can you explain what Grand Cru is in Alsace? A little bit of the history too.
Yes, so the Grand Cru movement in Alsace started a bit later than in some other regions because of the history of Alsace. I mean, we've been going back and forth, been in France and Germany, and a lot of wars for almost uninterrupted wars for 200 years, which eventually only stopped at the end of the Second World War. So that's only by then that people started putting more time, efforts, and thinking into the vineyards because before that there was just it was just too hectic to even start structuring all this. And so the Grand Cru movement started here with my grandfather, Theophile, and some of his friends in the 60s, where they wanted to put guidelines on the yields and identify some of the historical terroirs of Alsace that had been known for centuries to be producing better quality wines. So there were 3 batches in Alsace that got the Grand Cru label. The first batch in 1975 was actually only the Grand Cru Schlossberg, where we are today. And then there was another batch in 83, in the early 80s, with some 20 and some change Grand Crus, and the last batch in the mid 90s with the other one. So now we have 51 Grand Crus, all of them on the hills with a superior type of soil, so you won't find any sandy or stilt soil on the Grand Crus. It's either marl, limestone, granites, volcanic, slates, or a bit more noble soil type, with restriction on the yields. So nowadays in Alsace, it's 55 hectoliters per hectare max. It's probably going to go down to 50 hectoliters per hectare soon. Far from our reality, as far as we are concerned, we are about 22 hectoliters per hectare on the Schlossberg, but that's our choice. And obviously, so on the hill, south or east facing for most of the Grand Crus. No north facing Grand Crus. Obviously, it's very difficult to properly ripen the grapes on the north facing side here because you're in the shadow. So it's mostly south facing, like the Schlossberg, a few east facing Grand Crus as well, like the Grand Cru Markheim and some other Grand Crus.
Would you mind, just because people pop in and pop out, and there's some new people here since you showed us where we are, would you mind showing us the view again from where you are?
Sure. Yeah. So that's the town of Kaisersberg here. I'm a bit against the sun here, but you see the castle over there. So that's the castle that gave its name to the Grand Cru. Schlossberg means castle hill in Alsatian and German. And this is some of the, so you see it's all terraced here, and maybe I can get a better view. It's going to be moving a little bit, but so we're in the part of the Grand Cru here. So the Schlossberg is one of the largest. It extends over 80 hectares in theory, but actually some bits are planted with our woods and forests. So the actual size of the Schlossberg that actually farmed with vineyards is more in the 60, 65 range, and not the 80 that you see often on when you start studying Alsace.
Wow. And my friend Anna Christina, the one I mentioned earlier, she asked about the soil composition there, if you would. And yeah, Anna, it is back there. We already discussed a little bit, but you can watch that.
Well, that's actually so. One of the characteristic of the Schlossberg, and the reason why it's very difficult to work, that the topsoil is very, very shallow. It's about a meter topsoil at the bottom over there, close to the village, and on the top, the topsoil is almost inexistent. It's a few centimeters of topsoil. So the topsoil is made of sand that actually erosion from the granite, and then the mother rock is you see it here. So this is the type of granite that we have on the Schlossberg. And you see it surfacing on a number of spots. So you see how shallow the topsoil here, because you see the rock surfacing in a lot of places here. You see it here as well. So that's the type of granites we have on the Schlossberg. So it's called two mica granites. It's varies between a slightly gray and a little bit pinkish granite. Again, drains a lot of water, very, very difficult, very tough for young vines. So what we do typically at Domaine Weinbach, we usually declassify all of our vineyards that are younger than 20, 25 years old, go into our entry-level Riesling. They don't go into our Grand Cru label, because you really need to give them a lot of time for the roots to crack through the rock and find some water.
Since we're looking right at it, can you explain what terracing is and how that works, and why it's special and why it's difficult?
Yeah, so we have one terrace here. You see it here. So you have one. So that's actually not our plot, so maybe not the best example in terms of soil work, because this has been rounded not too long ago, but at least you can see the terrace.
Yeah, I'm
so
always
you have one terrace here, and then you go up. So the idea first, the slope is, as far as we are concerned, when the angle of the slope is over 20, 25 degrees, we use terraces, because otherwise you have too much erosion, especially in those very light soils like granites. Some of our neighbors, some people try to plant, even when it's very steep, they try to plant vertically in the way of the slope. But what would happen is that after every storm in the summer, you have to bring back dozens of square meters of earth, of ground after every storm. And the other cool thing with terrace on top of erosion is also you use a bit more flatter. And when it rains, even if it's not a storm, but if it's a more quiet rain, the rains tend to settle a bit more and doesn't go down too much. So you're able to keep a bit more of the rainfall compared to planting in the way of the slope. Now, obviously, it's a lot more time consuming, a lot more labor intensive, and difficult than planting regularly vertically. And the other thing that's very expensive, very time consuming, is to rebuild those walls. So those are all dry stone walls that once in a while, they just crumble down every other decade or so. So you have to build them back up. So you actually also spend a lot of time and manpower into building those walls back up.
And you said dry stone. That means there's not mortar, right? It's like an industry that really.
Exactly. Yeah. You cannot use mortar because we're also very close to on top of the historical facts. It's also because we're close to the castle and a medieval village. It's regulated, so you don't just use concrete all over the place.
And then you.
Sorry, I lost you here, Jeff.
Harvested also then?
Sorry?
Everything is hand harvested?
Yes. Even I think here, I mean, for us, we hand harvest all of our vineyards, but here on the Schlossberg, even if you wanted, you couldn't use machine. It's just impossible to harvest with a machine here on the Schlossberg.
And there was a question a minute ago about the top or the how does that affect?
I'm sorry, the line is pretty bad.
That's
I didn't get you.
I'm
It's
gonna go
cutting
back
quite a bit.
where there was better connection.
Yeah,
Someone
let me
asked
speak.
where the best wines come from, the top of the slope or the middle.
As usual, and you'll probably hear the same in Burgundy and some other places, we find that the best wine come from the mid-slope area. That's also true for the Grand Cru Schlossberg. We actually do a different wines on mid-slope. So we do at that Domaine Weinbach 2 cuvées on the Grand Cru Schlossberg. We have our regular Grand Cru Schlossberg, which comes from the top parts of the slope, and the Grand Cru Schlossberg Cuvée Sainte Catherine, which is sort of our best vineyards, older vines, mid-slope on the Grand Cru. So that's mid-slope is usually where you get the best sort of mix between the ripening conditions, the water resource, the sun exposure, etc. On the top part, it gets sometimes very, very difficult, a lot of hydric stress. And on the bottom of the hill, you get a lot more water, slightly higher yields, not so much minerality because you have a lot more topsoil on top of the rock. So yeah, we tend to consider that mid slope is usually where you make the best wines.
How does that translate into actual taste, like the top of the hill versus the St. Catherine in the middle slope?
On the mid slope, you get a bit more ripening, a bit more fat. I would say a bit more fat, depth, and complexity in the wine compared to the top. At the bottom, you get some fat also at the bottom because you get good ripening condition, you get water, but you don't get the same minerality, the same depth. So a bit more leaner type of Rieslings at the bottom. Maybe sometimes with a bit more acidity because you have some clay pockets at the bottom. But a bit more linear. On mid slope, you get a bit more fat, a bit more texture.
Oh, cool. Thank you. So what are the grapes that you grow and the wines that you make? If you could kind of give us a rundown.
So we farm nowadays 38 hectares of vineyards scattered a bit across the valley of Kaisersberg that we have seen here. Let's show it again if it's not too windy.
I appreciate it.
So we are on the Schlossberg. Over there, you can see the Grand Cru Fürstentum, and on the far east end, the Grand Cru Mombourg. So all those three Grand Crus, seems like they're on the same sort of hill finger, but there's actually a little valley in between the Schlossberg and the other two, which is a geological fault. That explains why we're on the granite on this side, and then we have marl and limestone on the Fürstentum and Mombourg over there. So out of the 38 hectares, we have about 10 hectares around the winery on sandy alluvial soil on granite pebbles, where we make some of our entry-level wines. So this is the Clos des Capucins. We do all of the Alsatian grape varieties down there: Pinot Noir, Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Muscat, Pinot Blanc, etc. On the Riesling, on the granite, we have mostly, on the Schlossberg, we have mostly Riesling. A little bit of Pinot Noir, a little bit of Muscat and Pinot Gris, but it's mostly Riesling that we grow on the Schlossberg. And then on the limestone soil over there, we do mostly Gewürztraminer on the Grand Cru Fürstentum and the Grand Cru Mombourg. Some Pinot Gris as well, mid-slope on the Lieu de Altenbourg, which is clay and limestone, a bit more clayish on mid-slope. And some of our entry mid-level Gewürztraminer also at the bottom of the slope there, which is clay and limestone soil. And we do a couple of Pinot Noirs as well now.
Okay.
On the limestone over there, which are our most sort of Burgundy-like Pinot Noirs, very different from our Schlossberg Pinot Noir, obviously, which is a bit more geeky mineral Pinot Noir. So in terms of grapes,
can you talk
is about... Sorry?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's about 45 in terms of planted surface area, about 45% Riesling, 20% Gewürztraminer, about 15% Pinot Gris, 5%, 6% Pinot Blanc and Auxerrois, 6% Pinot Noir, and then 3% Muscat, 3% Sylvaner.
Wow. Eddy, can you talk briefly about, because we're getting close to 10:30 or the half-hour mark at least, and I try to keep them under a half hour. Can you explain Alsatian food and why your wines are extraordinary with the food also?
Well, Alsatian food is pretty diverse. We use quite a bit of spice, which can be surprising for northeast of France, but we use quite a bit of spice in the choucroute, in some of our meat dish. in the pastries as well. And so even with the cheese, sometimes we serve it with cumin. I'm not sure what's the word in English for cumin.
Cumin? Cumin?
Cumin, yeah. So we do use quite a bit of spice. We use horseradish as well with fish. Actually, most of the wasabi you can find in the world is fake wasabi. It's made out of horseradish with green
Yeah.
green color. But we use a lot of horseradish in Alsace. So it's a pretty spicy, it's classic, but with a touch of spice. So with the choucroute, Riesling goes very well. Or an older Riesling would go very well with cocoa Riesling, which is a stew of chicken cooked in a bit of in Riesling sauce and mushrooms, a bit of cream. That works very well with an older, like a 10, 15, 20-year-old Riesling that gets this sort of creamy texture. Gewürztraminer, very interesting with our cheese, with Munster cheese and most of the cheese in general. Also a very interesting wine with spicier food. Personally, I eat a lot of Thai food at home. We like to cook like curry, green curries, and an old 20-year-old Gewürztraminer with green curry chicken. It's probably some of the best pairings you can do. You can find around. And Pinot Gris is probably our most versatile grape varieties. When it's made dry or relatively dry, it can go with fish, white meats, or even slow cooked red meat like a slow cooked lamb, or barbecue pork ribs. Barbecue style can go very well with a Pinot Gris. So it's a bit underrated, I think, but very interesting food wise.
Yeah, I always think of sausage for some reason up there, and there's wine up. So, can you talk about the versatility of the pairing for Alsatian wine?
Yeah, so again, basically it range. You have the Sylvaner, which can be very dry, a bit more malic acids. The Riesling, which is very good acidity, but also a bit the same line, very vertical wines, good acidity. So those are wines that typically can go on the use very well with fish, whether it's cooked fish, grilled fish, or even ceviche or Japanese type of foods. I'm talking more sashimi, not the more hybrid or fusion type of Japanese food. Then the Pinot Gris is probably a bit more versatile, white meat, poultry, and Gewürztraminer. You can go with Indian food, Thai food, or some of the spicier sweet and sour Japanese cuisine. Plus the Pinot Noir. I think if you missed on Alsatian Pinot Noirs, the quality has jumped amazingly over the past 20 years. So you'll find some amazing Pinot Noirs in Alsace nowadays, with obviously a much more better value for money compared to Burgundy. So they're very. So if you bring you go from Sylvaner to Gewürztraminer, also with a Pinot Noir, I think you can cover pretty much any type of food you'll find in any restaurants or in any home.
Yeah, totally. I 100% agree with that. And I find more and more people, at least, are eating a little bit lighter and always go to a big Alsatian.
Yeah, and I think that the future of mankind is more toward light fish and lighter food and less meat. And so, white wines and Pinot Noir, I think, are working pretty well in that context.
Yeah, totally. So how does Domaine Weinbach stand out? Why is Weinbach unique or different in the region?
I think we've been for a very long time now, since my grandfather focused on quality rather than quantity. So our yields have been working a lot in terms of farming, very low yields, a lot of attention to the details. We switched to biodynamic farming 20 years ago.
Wow.
On all of our vineyards. So we've been certified Demeter now for 15 years. So a lot of care in the farming, a very, I would say, differentiated farming. We have about 200 different plots. Every single plot, every year we do a round. We take 2 or 3 days to do a round of all of our plots in 2 days, and check out the soil management, the work management, the soil work on every type of plot, and decide if it's okay, if we have to change the cover crop, the type of cover crop, the percentage of cover crop, the type of pruning. So every single plot is treated differently. So I think this very thorough work is very important for us. In terms of winemaking, it's a bit more, I would say, traditional, as little intervention as possible. We use old food, so Alsatian traditional vessel. Although nowadays a lot of people are switching to stainless steel because it's easier to maintain, cheaper to maintain. But the food have a little micro oxygenation that you won't get on the stainless steel. So the stainless steel will always put a little bit of a reductive touch, especially on Riesling, which can be a little bit reductive. So we like to keep our old food.
Wow.
So spontaneous fermentation, native yeasts, and then at the end of the fermentation, we'll do a racking, bring the temperature down if needed to make sure we stop the fermentation, and keep the wine on fine lees for a few more months. And typically we would bottle after between 8 and 12 months of aging.
Wow. That's really cool. Thank you for that very quick rundown. You're a very good educator.
Thank you. And in terms of positioning, I think we've been known compared to other producers. If you take the scope of Alsace, you go to extremely dry, austere side, you'll find the Trimbachs and the Jugels. On the other hand, on the other extreme, you'll find the Holy Gasman and the Gintombrecht, who have been known to be a bit more on the sweeter, bit bigger. And I think for us, we really try to focus on the balance. So I think we've been, for a couple of decades now, really more in the middle of the spectrum. Not too austere, not too dry, not too big, not too heavy. Really focusing on the balance and the elegance of the wines and make them food friendly.
Dima Krasny asked before, do you have Muscat in the Grand Cru vineyard, and then in wine do you use malolactic? Does that happen?
We have a small plot of Muscat on the Grand Cru Schlossberg, but we don't. It's a very small plot, so we can't even fill food with it. So we actually blend it with ferment it together with our other couple of Muscat plots down in the Clos des Capucins. So we do only one Muscat, but it does contain a small part of it comes from the Grand Cru Schlossberg. Yeah. And malolactic, we try to avoid malolactic, especially on the Rieslings. Obviously, being biodynamic, it's to be always working a bit on a tightrope. It's you cannot make sure you prevent malolactic. Sometimes it happens. When it does start, we let it go through. Usually it's when the fermentation stalls on the Riesling in November, when the cellar gets colder, fermentation stalls. You still have some residual sugar, so you don't want to rack because you want the fermentation to resume in the spring, in springtime, and then during the winter, usually the malolactic will happen. When it does happen, we let it go through because the worst thing you can do is hammer it with sulfites to stop the malolactic. So we let it go through. Try to avoid it with controlling the fermentation, racking it pretty quickly at the end of the fermentation in Riesling. On Pinot Gris and Pinot Blanc, over the past few years, we have been a bit more, I would say, cool with malolactic. So sometimes we even let it happen on purpose. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Because I think malolactic goes pretty well for me with the Pinot family, whether it's Pinot Noir, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris. I think the type of flavor profile, texture of the malolactics goes pretty well with the Pinot family. Unlike with a Riesling, I'm not convinced. I don't think it goes very well with what you expect from a Riesling and what we expect from a Riesling.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm gonna end this and ask you for some final thoughts. But while you think about that, I will ask you to show us the vineyard one more time. And
Sure.
the reason I started doing this is a lot of people are still quarantined, and it's really special. It's actually really lovely to see you when this all went down. A friend reminded me that the vine shop, and I think it's very optimistic to look at that coming crop and the work you guys do. So I want to thank you for that, and thank you for being with me, and thank you to all the Vineyard Brands crew. Patrick reached out to talk to you. That you were so great to speak with, and I'm so thankful for the time to chat with us.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I actually just walked to our last planted plot here on the Schlossberg. So that's a high density trial that we're doing. That's 9,000 feet per hectare.
Whoa!
We planted a few weeks ago. The average in Alsace for white wine is more around 5,000 to 6,000 feet per hectare.
Wow.
So this is more Pinot Noir type of planting. So this was planted a few weeks ago, and we just have a few small leaves coming up here.
Wow! See, that's optimism right there.
Yeah, because this is only going to be producing great wine in 30 years. But we've changed a bit the rootstock strategy also to be a bit more resistant to the lack of water.
Wow. Thank you so much, Eddie. This has just been such a great way to start my day and hopefully to wrap up your day. You want to say it before we go?
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. It was a pleasure chatting with you. And I think we've typically we've had a lot of Americans coming to Alsace. I think Americans tend to love Alsace. But for those of you who haven't come yet or who plan to come back, please visit us. We're always happy to have people over and show you around and have you taste the wine. So hopefully when all this storm is over, we can all gather in Alsace or in the US.
I hope so. I look forward to seeing you here or there sooner rather than later. Thanks for your time, man.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeff. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.